On Sunday the 3rd of November 1995, the dead finally stayed dead. To this date, nobody knows why or how the zombie apocalypse happened, or why and how it came to such an abrupt end. But for 28 terrifying years, it did happen. Today, as we continue to rebuild and repopulate, we take a look back at the apocalypse and try to answer some of the questions that until now, people have been too afraid to ask outright. We also look to the future and ask, will we ever be able to lead normal lives again? After the dead. This is a photograph of Lorna Dunn, an average single working woman in her late 30s. This photograph of Lorna was taken just 8 months later. Here she's captured leaving her home on Rochdale Avenue and wandering the streets, seemingly in a state of complete confusion. She's pitifully thin, extremely pale, and has large bloody bruises all over her body. An elderly neighbor from across the street approaches her and asks if she's okay, but receives no answer. Then, unprovoked and without warning, the woman attacks him. The man reels back in shock and pain.
No, please. Lorna, it's me, Ben Riley. Don't you recognize me? Oh, God. Please.
Lorna Dunn then disappears into the night and is never seen again. The elderly man dies an hour later in the back of an ambulance on the way to Allegheny General Hospital. Within a week, the entire city of Pittsburgh was like a battlefield.
It's difficult to explain what's happening here right now, ladies and gentlemen. There are people running scared. Others are fighting, while others still are engaging in some form of cannibalism. Yes, you heard correct. Cannibalism. There are people trying to, and in some cases, succeeding in eating the flesh. Oh God, it's just carnage. Perhaps some kind of drug-fueled cult is involved in the rioting. Perhaps it's politically based. But the cannibalism, I'm afraid, I just cannot account for what the cause is behind that at this present time.
The government and the military were not involved at that point. You need to remember that there was all sorts of crazy stuff happening already back then. You had Vietnam going on. You had the civil rights movement, race riots. You had Israel at war with Syria. I mean, a few crazed rioters in Pittsburgh was not considered a major cause for alarm.
We feel that the Pittsburgh police force are very capable of handling the situation. There are protest riots happening all over the country right now that are being effectively handled by state police. And at this point, we see no reason why things should be any different here in Pittsburgh.
Sir, would you care to answer on reports of cannibalism and the dead returning to life within the rioting?
Cannibalism? Yeah, sure, why not? There are some very powerful illegal drugs on the streets right now, and it wouldn't surprise me in the least if they triggered that kind of reaction in someone. But that's another agenda for another time. As for dead people getting up and walking around, no comment, and shame on you.
And that's the way it was. It was all a big joke to them. They just couldn't accept it. And why should they? Who the hell is going to take you seriously if you tell them the dead are getting up, walking around, and eating people, right? Hell, even when you see all that happening right in front of you, you still don't believe it.
It would be a further 2 weeks before the military finally got involved and were assigned to the danger zones around the state of Pennsylvania. But still, nobody in government could believe or accept that the dead were rising. and by this point, it was already too late.
As you can see, we're just flying over Faro Bridge now. And my guess is that all the people you can see down there are neither fully alive or fully dead. I would say there's about 800 to 1,000 of those things on the bridge alone. So what does that tell us about the rest of the city? Man, we are so fucking screwed.
I don't think you should be swearing on national
Seriously,
TV.
Jack? America's going to hell, and you're worried about my fucking language? We believe we have the situation temporarily contained.
Temporarily contained? How can you even say that?
There is no evidence to support the rumors that the virus has spread outside of the United States. We have impenetrable safe havens within every major city nationwide. All essential travel will now be conducted under military supervision, and all access outside of the United States is now prohibited by law, with the death penalty imposed on anybody attempting to leave the country.
Yeah, try telling that to those who are dead already.
Yeah, that was me. I was pissed. Contained? Was this guy for frickin' real? I was taking a break one day down by a riverbank. It was one of those beautiful places, peaceful places. Not a lot of people around, which basically meant not a lot of dead people around either. Anyways, I was kicking back, having a beer or two, and kinda just looking out over the river in a daze. It took a while for me to lift my gun. I was just standing there, waiting for them to fall or drown, but they just kept on coming. That one moment told me everything I needed to know. We could not contain this shit. The undead were going global. Simply put it, the world was fucked.
Okay, so tell me again why I'm not allowed to sail out of here on my own goddamn boat.
Sir, as you well know, we are dealing with a highly contagious, life-threatening virus. You could potentially be a carrier, and I dare say you've witnessed the effects of the virus firsthand. If we let you sail beyond U.S. waters, you will be received as a contagion risk by every country in the world, and they will not be as helpful or forgiving as we are trying to be right now.
Then I'll look for a bloody uncharted island or something.
No can do, sir.
Look, just let me take my chances for God's sake. I have a wife and a 10-year-old daughter on board that boat, and they are both terrified.
No can do, sir. Sorry. We are under strict government orders. You need to return to your local quarantine station. It's about 3 miles down the road, and we will provide you with an escort.
Do I look like a fucking zombie to you? I'm not going to be holed up in an overcrowded pit, waiting for someone to stick their finger up my ass. What if the people there are already infected? What the hell happens then? Look, I know my rights. I'm getting on that boat, and we're leaving. Now.
Sir, this is your third and final warning. You put 1 foot on that boat, and I will shoot you.
For trying to save our own bloody lives. You're not going to do that, soldier. You're not that stupid.
All right, fine. Would you please stop filming this? Turn that camera off, please. Thank you. Okay, this is your last chance, sir. Please step away from the boat. Please step off the boat and return to your local quarantine station, ma'am. We'll get somebody to escort you both there, okay? All right. Watch your step.
Back in '73, the US government were considering a series of nuclear assaults across the country, and we are talking about 80 to 90% of all major cities there to combat the virus. The reason they did not go ahead with this was, thankfully, fear. The virus had spread on a major level, with large cases being reported across Europe, Asia, and Africa. If the US military had gone ahead with the strikes, then you would have had other countries taking similar action. And the million-dollar question back then was, will we erase mankind before they do?
So the government devised another plan. All of the world's issues prior to the zombie epidemic, all wars, riots, and acts of human ignorance, stupidity, greed, and power-mongering would be brushed aside, forgiven and forgotten, in theory at least. They would assemble the United World Alliance and military to fight against the ever-increasing undead army.
The world has a common enemy. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care if you're strong or weak, rich or poor, good or evil. It doesn't care about the color of your skin or your religious beliefs. It just wants to eat your flesh and turn you into one of them. This is the very reason the United World Alliance was formed. Whatever continent, whatever country, whatever city, town, or village, the United World Alliance will be there to help. The United World Alliance, preserving life itself.
Let's face it, the UWA was a great idea on paper, but the Alliance should have been formed way before the zombie apocalypse actually started, and it should have bloody worked. By the time it was all put together, it very quickly fell apart again.
It could have, and should have been the answer to wiping out the undead infestation. I mean, think about it for a second. The world united. Wow, right? The troops were ready to go. Ready to kick zombie ass and restore the balance, no questions asked. The politicians? Now that's a different story. There were a few countries, Russia, Iraq, Japan in particular, that were still skeptical about the actual scale of the zombie invasion, despite the fact that the undead were arriving on their shores in their masses. Yet amazingly, their attitude was pretty much, we're willing to help out, but it won't come cheap. Bottom line, they would only join the UWA if the rest of the world paid them to.
The UWA would fail, not because of the scale of the zombie problem, but because of continued acts of human ignorance, stupidity, greed, and power-mongering. It became clear that even with our very existence on the line, we had not learned our lesson. On April 16, 1975, all media broadcasting worldwide had ceased.
WOWO received this emergency announcement just moments ago. We have to verify, we did verify, with a special message in code, and this is an emergency action directed by the Emergency Network and directed by the President.
The apocalypse was now in full effect, aided further by the fall of the UWA and other attempts to stem the flow. The military was still operational despite dwindling numbers, but was now focused solely on defense and scientific experiments which were being conducted in high-security facilities across the U.S.
Are we running? Are we on? Okay. My name is Dr. Carl Fielden, conducting experiment AEUV49, Phase 1, from a currently classified location. The date is Wednesday, April 23rd, 1975, and the time is 9:15 a.m. Behind me is a secure test room that has been specifically rigged for this series of experiments. Inside the room we have our animal test subject, which is a healthy adult sheep that has been heavily sedated and suspended on a harness approximately 2 feet from the ground. The harness is just a secondary measure to ensure the sheep doesn't move around too much during the experiment. An undead human subject will now be released into the room and will be allowed to bite but not kill the sheep. To ensure the undead subject does not kill the sheep, a marksman will be on hand to dispose of the undead subject from a safe distance with a gunshot to the head.
I'm Dr. Joseph Kwong, standing in for Dr. Carl Fielden on experiment AEUV-49 Phase 2. Friday, April 25th, it's 11:35 a.m. The sheep, after recovering briefly from the undead subject's bite, died as suspected yesterday at 1:15 p.m. We're still running some blood tests, but it pretty much looks like yet another animal subject uninfected by the undead virus itself. It's still difficult to determine what is exactly killing all the test animals. But the good news, if it can be called good news, is that so far they are not returning to life.
The military, despite further experiments, and like the UWA before them, would not provide a worthwhile solution, and it wouldn't be long before armies across the globe would all but be swallowed up in the undead sea. We weren't just losing, we were facing extinction. From here on in, it was all about survival of the fittest. Every man, woman, and child for themselves. With no government, military, or police, it was a time of uncontrolled chaos. Survivors now faced an even deadlier threat than the zombies themselves. The living.
In my profession, I'd worked on some truly disturbing cases. Some people were absolutely beyond help. Others eventually conquered their mental and/or behavioral problems and were happily living out their lives again in a civilized fashion. But when you suddenly see the very fabric of society crumble overnight, and you have to bear witness to rape, torture, suicide, genocide, murder, abuse, mutilation, necrophilia, cannibalism, ritual slaughter, every conceivable, ungodly, unlawful act you could possibly imagine on a daily basis, you then begin to contemplate and question your career choice somewhat.
God damn it, you got that fucking camera thing working yet, Moose? How difficult can it be?
It's making a weird noise of some kind.
And action. Welcome to everyone's favorite show, Zombie Undead Ghoul Shit for Brains versus Sledgehammer. This week, our contestant is Mr. Who Gives a Rat's Ass from Rubble Heap, US of A. Okay, question time, Mr. Ass. This is for $10,000. No conferring or biting, please. Why, oh why won't you stay the fuck dead? Wrong answer, I'm afraid. But you still get the wonderful consolation prize, which is this stunning 14-pound sledgehammer to the head. How do you feel about that?
Please. I'm not one of them. I'm not a zombie. I'm not dead. I'm not dead.
Oh, yes you are, son. Oh, yes you are.
I don't think zombies can talk, Cletus.
Shut the hell up and play cameraman Moose. He's a fucking zombie, okay? And zombies get their goddamn heads caved in by Mr. Sledgehammer here. Ain't that right?
Hold up, Cletus. Let me get a better shot of this.
No.
All right, man.
Please, God,
do it.
No. And there it goes. Over the crowd and out of the park. It's good.
Yeah. Like a fucking watermelon, man.
Now that's what I'm talking about, Moose. Let's find another. See if we can't get ourselves an undead bitch this time.
I ended up trading in my diploma and my patient's couch for a good quality sawn-off shotgun. If you can't beat 'em, join 'em, so they say.
Hey, boys and girls. This is Mitch Coogan, talking to you through the magic of military technology. Actually, I found this camcorder at an old army base near Detroit, and I had no idea what the hell it was at first. Just thought it looked real cool and, well, expensive, and I decided to take it. I'm pretty glad I did now, because this is a great little invention. With this baby, I can actually point the camera at myself and let you all know what's been happening lately. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So, where to start? Okay. I've already told you my name. I'm 49 years old, and I was a truck driver for a pharmaceutical company in San Francisco back in the day. I was happily married to a wonderful lady. I had 2 beautiful kids. But that was a long time ago. So, down to business. We are now in August of 1988, and I haven't seen a single living soul in well over a year. And believe me, I've covered some ground north, south, east, and west. The major cities, they're still crawling with the undead. But some of the smaller towns and villages, well, they're just completely dead. Food is scarce. Extremely scarce. All the malls, the stores, the warehouses, and the gas stations, completely cleaned out. You get some odd scraps here and there, but it's becoming more and more difficult to find any small animals, any nutritional vegetation of any kind. Thankfully, there's still some sources of drinkable water scattered about. Just make sure the stream or river doesn't have any bodies floating around within viewing distance. That's where the good news ends. You know, maybe I'm the last person on Earth still alive, in which case this film is a complete waste of time. But I haven't eaten in nearly 2 weeks, and as you can see, I'm not exactly a picture of health right now, so this might be my last useful contribution or something. And time, well, that's all I've got left anyway. It's best that I switch this thing off now. One more piece of advice. If anyone picks this up, you head north as far as you can. The colder the climate, the better. Those things, they hate the cold. But only if you're good on supplies. Otherwise, you'll be joining them, if you know what I mean. Judy, Christine, Kurt, I love you guys, and I miss you all a lot. No doubt I'm going to see you soon. Peace out.
One thing that everybody learned during the apocalypse was to stay well away from the city. The cities were always crawling with ghouls. But there comes a time, especially when you haven't eaten anything for weeks, that searching the city for scraps is the only option you have left. So, on this particular morning, I decided to chance it and head into the heart of Brooklyn. There was a major storm going on that day. It was raining real heavy. I figured it might deter the ghouls a little. I somehow managed to work my way through the city center unseen and came across a small convenience store. And I thought I struck gold when I found an undamaged tin of corned beef. When I went back outside, I was greeted by a gang of ghouls, about 10 of them. But there was something not quite right. They weren't attacking me, for one thing. If anything, it was almost like I wasn't even there. They were just stood there motionless, staring up at the sky in complete silence. And all of a sudden, they just started falling to the ground one by one, and they didn't get back up again.
On Sunday the 3rd of November 1995, it was all over. For whatever reason on that day, the dead remained as nature had originally intended them to. They did not rise, they did not walk around, they did not groan or scream, And most importantly, they did not attack, eat, or infect the living. They just stayed dead.
The sky was black and red. It was beautiful to look at and terrifying at the same time. And the rain came down like a waterfall. It was just relentless. Then came the thunder, louder than I'd ever heard before, and lightning, more bright and intense than I'd ever seen before. But despite all of that, it was still an amazing and glorious day for humankind. You just knew in your heart that everything was going to change on that day. It felt like we were being forgiven for all of our sins and a whole new world lay ahead of us. I believed some divine power was looking down on us. And I could almost hear him saying, "Okay, I'll give you guys one last chance. But be good. Because if you mess this one up, I'll come back and finish the job."
Hope was finally renewed. Survivors came out of hiding in their droves, and for the first time in 28 years, they were not afraid to look over their shoulders anymore. They could sleep peacefully that night, and look forward to rebuilding their lives, their families, and their homes. But before the dream could be realized, there was still a mountain of hard work to do.
Alright, listen up guys. Make sure you keep your faces covered, particularly when going into confined spaces. Remember, those corpses have just been rotting away wherever they fell 3 months ago. They may not be able to attack you and chew on your flesh anymore, but that doesn't mean they can't still kill you. They're absolutely crawling with diseases that need to be handled with the greatest of care. So if you can, try to wrap your hands too. If you have a pair of gloves, even better. Take care not to get scratched by their teeth or fingernails in particular. Watch your surroundings, and just remember that everything around you is a potential danger right now. Okay, James, you lead a group into Sector 1. Karen, Sector 2. Charlie, Sector 3. Carry a weapon, and stay vigilant at all times, okay? We still don't know for sure that those things aren't going to get back up and bite us in the ass again. Be careful out there.
So how's it going, Mike?
Pretty good so far. It's an incredibly tough operation, but the team's very thorough and hardworking. I mean, they have to be, you know? But everyone's doing a fantastic job so far.
At the rate the cleanup's progressing, how long do you think it'll take before we get back to some kind of normal?
Are you kidding me? We're not even close, man. Try to imagine this scenario in every town, city, and country in the world. Then add everything in between to that. Rivers, fields, deserts, woodlands, highways. There were 3.5 billion people on this planet before the apocalypse kicked in, and I don't know how many are left now. But if it's even more than half that figure, that still leaves a hell of a lot of corpses to clear up. Not to mention 28 years of neglect in general.
Do you honestly believe there's over 1 billion dead bodies out there?
Absolutely.
So what happens after we've cleaned up?
It's gonna be several years before we come even close to a business-as-usual standard. We need fuel, power, and equipment for starters. And that's just to aid in the cleanup alone. The dark times are pretty far from over.
Jackson, take some men and clear the garbage filter. Lawrence, do we have access to a large net? Like a fishing net or something? And get some strong rope too if you can. About 20 foot long would be great.
I'm at the old Kaufman Steelworks in Minnesota. I heard it was one of the largest furnaces in the country, and that being the case, we're gonna take a look at it and see if we can get it up and running. If we can, this is where we're gonna bring the bodies, the corpses, for disposal. Much quicker and safer than burning them on the streets. The only real problem is how the hell we get them up here.
I've been in charge of the cleanup campaign here in Boston since back in the mid-90s, and as you can see, it's finally taken shape again. All the corpses have been completely cleared, the properties are clean and safe again, and most are now occupied by families. The streets are clean, we have 90% power and energy restored, and some industries are actually back in business. We've restored a lot of old vehicles here too. Cars, trucks, buses, even trains, which will certainly get you from A to B until production on new vehicles begins. Telephones are working again, clean running water throughout the city, plenty of food. Life is good.
Today, normality, order, and routine are pretty much established again worldwide, but questions still remain unanswered. What was responsible for making the dead return to the realm of the living? And how and why did the apocalypse end so abruptly? At the beginning of the show, we mentioned this woman, Lorna Dunn. What we didn't mention was that Lorna was suffering from breast cancer for 4 months before her death. Nothing unusual there, you might think, until we learn about the circumstances surrounding those 4 months.
My father, Professor William Getty, was part of a cancer research team at Pittsburgh University from 1964 to 1967, and in November of 1966, he had made a very exciting short film regarding his recent discoveries. I'm William Getty. I'm a professor of medicine, and I believe I've discovered a cell sterilization formula, which when combined with a standard penicillin base, could be administered as a 99.7% eradication treatment and would, in that percentage, effectively be the cure for cancer. He was up for numerous awards and honors following that film. The Nobel Peace Prize was mentioned at one point. All he had to do was back up his claim, and that would of course require a terminally ill cancer patient willing to play guinea pig to his formula over a sustained period of time.
In January 1967, Lorna Dunn was diagnosed with terminal cancer of her right breast, but she was offered the opportunity to be a guinea pig for a trial run of Professor Getty's formula, an offer which she happily accepted. In May of that year, she was given the all clear. Her cancer had been cured, and the formula, officially but briefly named as Aradexine, was hailed a success. But despite the all clear, Lorna was still very ill.
Lorna Dunn's health record stated that she had been to see her GP in May 1967 regarding severe headaches. Incredibly, they were dismissed as migraines, and she was given a course of painkillers. In July, presumably, she died in her home at the age of 37. Today, she is credited in the history books as being the first victim of the undead virus, and thereafter the first of the living dead.
Professor Getty's Aradexine formula was suspected as a contributing factor in Lorna Dunn's death and was seized by the government in September 1967 for further testing. The results were never disclosed. Getty's film footage was doctored for the press, and no evidence on the formula or any documentation regarding it have been submitted for public release to date. But could it be possible that something within Getty's discovery was responsible for Lorna Dunn's death, and more importantly, her undead state thereafter?
I think it's highly feasible, and I genuinely believe that's what happened, especially when you consider some of the other so-called theories over the years, UFO abductions, voodoo, act of God, and so forth. The real problem is, you only have my word on all of this, and I'm afraid that in the end I really only know as much as you do. So, where do we go from there?
If there's doubt as to how the apocalypse started, then there's probably more so as to how it actually ended. What could possibly cause over 1 billion undead people worldwide to fall and remain dead in a single day?
A lot of people are quick to dismiss the theory that the undead apocalypse was an act of God. But even if its beginnings were man-made, how can anyone possibly explain the end of it in logical and/or scientific terms? I mean, what really wiped out the dinosaurs? Perhaps it was something very similar. A virus, a disease, an epidemic. Who knows? Perhaps we are long overdue the next stage of human evolution, and perhaps this is how the process happens. I absolutely believe that the undead apocalypse was the work of our Lord, and that it was just the tip of the iceberg. He is paving the way for something incredible and wonderful. He does have a brilliant plan, and we are all instruments at his disposal within that plan.
I will always remember the storm on that day. Every survivor I've spoken to since the ghouls stayed dead has talked about the storm. How it didn't feel natural, or how it didn't look natural. How heavy the rain was, and how the atmosphere was filled with electricity. I honestly couldn't tell you how or in what way, but I'm pretty sure that storm had a big part to play in the fall of the undead.
There are no official records stating whether the storm was actually a worldwide event or not on that particular day. Certainly none that I'm aware of, but I've conducted my research in places as far afield as Brazil, Australia, Norway, and China over the past couple of years, and heard first-hand accounts from survivors in those countries, and every single one of the hundreds of people I've spoken to mentioned the heavy rain and the electrical atmosphere. When something like that happens, you really can't accept that it's purely coincidental. I mean, I'm not in any way a religious person, but there are things that happen in life that can certainly make you question your own beliefs, particularly when it comes to matters of this nature.
For now, the world is a safe place again. At least as safe as it ever was before the dead arose and walked among us. If there are any positives to take from the undead apocalypse, they would have to be that it taught us the true meaning of courage, determination, and respect. A very real and honest appreciation for life in our world is perhaps far greater today than it ever has been.
Could it happen again? Absolutely. Back in the 1970s, my father told me, when there is no more room in hell, the dead shall walk the earth. I've always remembered that. And I'm guessing that hell is out of season or something. Probably has a few vacancies right now. But in time, there will be plenty more people on that guest list. And it won't be long before hell is overcrowded again. Trust me.